Hey, here's another TouchDesigner video. Making this to help one of my students, but it seems like it's probably applicable to a lot of different use cases, I guess. So in this case, there are three videos, and we want to cycle through them using a switch. So you can see as I go from zero, anywhere between 0 and 1, it stays on that first one. And then when I get to 1, it goes to, movie number 1, which is this one, the input number 1. And then as I go to 2, it changes to the third one there. And then anything above 2 is just going to stay at that third video. So if you turn on blend between inputs, it actually crossfades between them, which is pretty nice. But this particular student wants to they actually have a phone that's sending OSC data about the compass direction. And so they want the videos to change depending on the direction of the phone. And that's easy enough, but they've gotten to a point where they want the behavior not to be so predictable, right? So we can very easily use a math chop to change the 0 to 360 input that's coming in into a 0 to 3 range. And that should fade between the three evenly. But what you end up with is this really kind of like linear translation, right? It goes from 0 to 360 on the bottom there. Those are the incoming numbers, and then they get translated to the vertical axis, which is 0 to 2 or 3, I guess, depending on how you do it. But either way, it's going to be a linear thing. And so it's always in the process of transitioning from one video to another is one issue. And also, you can't say that one video is more likely to show up, right? Like, what if you want the first 180 degrees to stick on video 1 and the last 180 degrees to be split up between multiple videos, that kind of thing. So what we're looking for is this kind of thing. So for my example, I want it to, still 0 to 360 that's coming in, but I want this network to be able to show videos 0, 1, and 2 in this different way, which is for the first 100 degrees, it shows video 0. And then it kind of, there's a ramping up to video number 1. And what that does for us is if, that ramping up phase is a bunch of decimal numbers between 0 and 1. And that gives us the crossfading with the switch. If you remember this option right here for blend between inputs, it basically just needs some decimal numbers. So if we look at that graph again, if we just kind of jumped up from 0 to 1 without a ramp there, we wouldn't have that crossfading happen. And then, that crossfading happens between 100 and 150 degrees. And then it stays, that video 1 stays on the screen until it gets to 200 degrees. And then it starts to fade to the last video, and it finishes that 50 degrees later. So, and these curves are linear, but they could also be different. I'll show you how that could work. But the solution that I came up with to get this kind of like drawn sort of translation, one that's not linear, is what I'm going to show now. So basically what we've got is here is kind of like pretending that we've got the compass, right? So I can go from 0 to 360. I've also got up here let me get rid of this. I've also got a different version, which is when I click go, it goes through a 0 to 360 cycle every time I hit go. So that's the same thing. Maybe it's kind of like if someone had the phone and they slowly turned it 360 degrees. It's easier to look at in some ways. So I have both here. But let's try this one first. So actually, let's do this one. What you'll see is when I hit go, we'll see it cycle through. Here's the first video, and then, oh, am I crazy? Okay, it's disconnected. So right now it's still just the slider here. But what I want is to have this control the index. So let's do this. Okay, So let's try that again. Click go, and you can see in the background the first video, and then it fades into the second one and then goes to the third. And if you look at this trail op over here, you can actually see the same curve that I drew in the spreadsheet. So it looks just like that. That's the main reason why I did this, so that I can see that happen. But, you know, I can also just pretend to be a phone and someone is moving it around, right? And so we get something that is responding in the way that I described, but you can see in the trail output, it's not as easy to compare to the spreadsheet, which is why I made this version. Okay, so how am I doing this? Basically, I get whatever number is coming out. It's still 0 to 360. There's no math changing it. And what I'm doing is using that 0 to 360, just like I did in the spreadsheet. 0 to 360 is the way that it's indexed on the bottom. And what it gives us is, you know, a number between 0 and 2. It's sort of like you look it up on the bottom, and then it gives you whatever number matches the line on the left. So the key is the word lookup. So we're using the actual lookup op to do this. And the way it works is by default, lookup, if we look at what I've changed here, I've changed the index range. Normally it's 0 to 1. So that means when you get a number coming in here on this first port, it's a number between 0 and 1. And what it'll do is use that to look up in this table a number that's showing up on the left here. So the bottom axis here is 0 to 1. So when you're at 1, it returns the number 1 here. When you're at half, it returns half, and that's because it's a linear kind of thing, right? So what I've done by changing this to 100 to 150 is it's basically going to ignore any numbers that are not in that range, 100 to 150, and then it uses that 100 150 range to look up the value in here. So now this is 100 and this is 150. So this is the kind of, if we can just show the graph again. This is this part right here. The first ramp is what we're getting out of this. So it's, you know, a steady 0, and then it ramps up using this lookup for this lookup table. How to get the lookup table? To get this table that looks like this, we've basically used a ramp top. This is one of the interesting things about TouchDesigner is, you know, like you would think you could just create something like this, but you can also create it by just making an image, right? And then we use top to chop to get channel information out of this image. And so that's RGB and alpha. And we just used select here to choose one of those. Doesn't matter if we choose RG or B, they all look the same because it's a gray image. But that's how we get this linear curve like this. So basically, you know, this is going to give us that, let me go back to this. When it's between 100 and 150, we're going to get a result that's between 0 and 1 here. That's somewhere on this line. Then we've got another one here for the second part, right? There's two parts to this. There's the first ramp there, and then there's the second ramp there. So this is the second one, and it's just like I described. It's when the input is between 200 and 250, it's going to look up the values in this ramp here. So what you end up with is just what you see. Like as I move this from left to right, it doesn't do anything for a while. Then it looks up all of the values in here as I go forward. And then it doesn't do anything for a while. And then it starts looking up those values again when it gets to the 200 to 250 range. And then it doesn't do anything after that. So that's what it's doing. Then I use a math. I'm not using it to translate the range at all. All I'm doing is using it to add the channels together. So, and I think that's the only thing I changed here. Well, combine channels, combine chops. I'm not sure which one is the important one there. Maybe you need them both. But basically, we're taking these two values and adding them together. So if you pay attention to what's happening there, hold on, did something. Okay, so watch the first one. It goes from 0 to 1, and the math on the right shows it's stuck at 1. And then when the second one starts, it doesn't. It adds that onto the one that was already there. So we're adding these two channels together. And of course, in the time over here where nothing's happening, there's 0 being added to it. So that's how we get this summed version of these two little ramps that happen at at the right time. Then we just take that as a null and feed that to the index. So yeah, I don't know that I described that the best way possible, but hopefully that makes sense. One thing that's interesting is if we change the ramp, like let's say we change it so that it's like more at the beginning, it goes quicker. Well, it actually changes this curve. So you can, this is why it's interesting to do with an image, because you can actually just change the image curve and get a different kind of fading in. So now if we look at how this fades in using the button again, keep an eye on the trail. You can see that it goes, but it actually has a different kind of curve going from in each of those kind of ramping up phases. It's following this sort of curve. Okay, hopefully that helps.